On a full moon night at the peak of a mountain, Captain Jin So-eun is praised for his impressive memory. Jin So-eun is gravely wounded and thanks the mysterious man with a hint of irony. The man says that thanks to him, they were able to restore all the records of the Murim Alliance. The leader of the Murim Alliance, named Yang So-ah, coldly thanks him for his services. Covered in blood, Jin So-eun kneels, remembering that he only did all of that because he was ordered to. He stares at the leader, indignant at receiving death as payment after all his dedication. Yang So-ah begins to draw his sword, saying that Jin So-eun knows too many secrets and poses a danger. The leader points his blade, stating that he and his memories must disappear for the good of the alliance. Jin So-eun lets out a sarcastic laugh upon hearing about this supposed great cause. He laughs out loud, mocking the idea that the Murim Alliance is in any real danger. The captain sneers, reminding him that the alliance has already lost to the demonic cult and lives on the run to survive. Yang So-ah insists that the Murim Alliance will still defeat their enemies and restore their name to the world. Jin So-eun scoffs, saying he wants to see how they will do that after using so many people as shields. He states that he cannot see the difference between the atrocities of the demonic cult and those of the alliance itself. The young man deeply regrets having trusted the fate of his beloved sect to such despicable people. He takes a step back at the edge of the abyss, feeling bitter regret for his choices. With his hand covered in blood, Jin So-eun decides to make one last drastic choice. He throws himself off the cliff, declaring that he will be the only one responsible for his own end. As he falls, he reflects that having a perfect memory turned his life into a true nightmare. Everything began when the war broke out, and he was drafted along with his sect companion. In the end, the alliance fled and used the disciples as human shields to ensure their own escape. To save his friends, he accepted the proposal to memorize all the valuable records of the alliance. Jin So-eun regrets not having fought or trained his martial arts to protect those he loved. He curses the heavens for having received a memory ability so useless in combat. Near death, his bracelet begins to glow intensely amidst the blood. He only wished he had enough strength to protect his disciples instead of begging others. Suddenly, a voice echoes, asking if he is really just going to give up and lie there. Someone pokes his head with a wooden sword, calling him a total idiot. Jin So-eun grips the hilt of his sword, cursing his memory that insists on recording everything. He stands up with a bruised face, realizing something very strange is happening. The young man cries out in pain, realizing that his mind is perfectly recreating the physical sensation of the blow. Looking around, he is confused to see several people gathered, staring at him. Jin So-eun widens his eyes, unable to believe the scene before him. He realizes he is back in the old training courtyard of his sect. His companions from the past watch him with expressions of complete surprise. The protagonist is extremely emotional, his face flushed upon seeing his friends alive again. Without thinking twice, he quickly advances toward his old companions. Jin So-eun gives both of them a tight hug, leaving them completely speechless. He remembers the young Hong lifeless and ignores her complaints about that sudden hug. He also hugs Gyumpyo, remembering his tragic death on the battlefield of the past. The other disciples begin to whisper, thinking he ate something spoiled or has gone crazy. The young man cries with emotion, thinking this is just a final hallucination before dying. Even if it is a hallucination, he smiles, happy to have the chance to see these beloved faces one more time. The two companions are extremely confused by his gentle behavior. Jin So-eun pinches Hong's cheek, saying that she was very cute when she was younger. He also pulls Gyumpyo's cheek, recalling the silly antics of his friend's child. A harsh voice interrupts the moment, asking if he is faking madness to avoid the duel. The opponent points the wooden sword, threatening to face the other disciples if he does not fight. Jin So-eun is disappointed that his supposed death hallucination brought back that annoying guy. It is Gae Cheol-yong, a rich young man who used the duels to beat up the sect's disciple. Thinking about how in the past they endured the blows in silence for fear of losing their sponsorship, Jin So-eun accepts the duel. He smiles excitedly, determined to take advantage of this supposed death hallucination to take revenge for all the humiliations of the past. Gae Cheol-yong grinds his teeth, completely furious at the protagonist's audacity and sass. The arrogant young man charges, delivering a swift blow and cursing Jin So-eun with all his anger. Meanwhile, Jin So-eun just watches the attack with extreme calm and focus in his eyes. He immediately recognizes the enemy technique called the Samyong sword, which used to defeat him in the past. That wild and violent technique had been taught to the rich young man by a famous wandering swordsman. The blow cowardly aimed for the opponent's eyes, but the protagonist's brilliant mind had already memorized every move. Jin So-eun dodges effortlessly, finding that attack slow compared to the warriors of the demonic cult. The adversary is in complete shock, realizing he missed the blow so cleanly. That whole attack seemed like child's play compared to the deadly techniques he memorized in the library. In his mind appear the diagrams and secrets of the legendary Sochin sword technique that he kept in his memory. With all the manuals floating in his thoughts, he can perfectly predict the rival's next step. The protagonist's gaze shines intensely while he prepares his pinpoint counterattack. Moving with extreme grace, he executes the basic movement of the Socheon technique to dodge the danger. He lands a precise blow that makes the adversary spit blood, not understanding how that was possible. Gai Cheol-yong trembles with dread, while the protagonist savors the incredible sensation of that victory. Jin So-eun raises his wooden sword, ready to finish the combat using his own sex martial art. He delivers a well-aimed strike to the rival's head, feeling indescribable satisfaction with the blow. The other disciples watch the end of the fight with their jaws dropped, unable to believe what they saw. The arrogant young man staggers in pain while Jin So-eun observes the scared reaction of everyone around. Hong and Jumpyo are horrified to see that he actually cracked the head of the heir to a large company. The defeated rival yells, furious and bloody, threatening the protagonist with all his strength. He demands that the protagonist face the consequences of his actions just before losing consciousness. The bully collapses face first on the floor, completely passed out, leaving Jin So-eun quite confused by the scene. One of the little disciples begins to stutter, not knowing how to react to such audacity. Soon after, everyone begins to celebrate the historic victory and apologizes for having doubted him before. The protagonist offers a proud smile upon hearing the sincere praise of his dear companions. He thanks the heavens for finally being able to leave without regrets after teaching that bully a lesson. Suddenly, a well-aimed punch hits Jin So-eun's face in the middle of his farewell thought. Hong yells, furious, asking if he has completely lost his mind to commit such madness. She questions what they will do if the sponsorship is cut, while the young man wonders about the fact that he feels physical pain. Hong complains that now they will have even less food, and the protagonist begins to suspect his own situation. He finally realizes with total astonishment that all of this is not just a simple death hallucination. Hong brings her face close with a dark and intimidating look, demanding responsible behavior from him. She delivers another blow, irritated by the nonsense the young man keeps muttering without stopping. Jin So-eun falls backward, completely dazed by the physical blows and the absurd revelation. He faints with his soul almost leaving his body upon realizing he really returned to the past. Time passes, and the setting changes to the wooden drawers of an old recovery medical room. Jin So-eun wakes up lying on a cot with a bandage on his cheek, resting quietly. He realizes he passed out after Hong's blows and takes advantage of the rest to organize his thoughts. He recalls that in his original timeline, everything began with the resurgence of the terrible demonic cult. The Murim alliance ended up being completely destroyed in the war, dragging the Tail sect along to ruin. Because he possessed an out-of-the-ordinary memory, he ended up receiving an extremely heavy burden at that time. His mission was to memorize all the records and techniques of the alliance before they were lost forever. He tried his best to record every detail of the sacred techniques without letting a single word escape. In exchange for this mental sacrifice, he only begged them to save his friends from the battlefield. But his efforts were betrayed by the leaders of the alliance, who decided to eliminate him for knowing too much. The young man believed he had died after falling off the cliff, but miraculously awakened in the past. In addition to returning in time, he realizes that he still maintains full access to all the secrets he memorized. Thanks to the martial arts manuals that still remained in his mind, he managed to change the course of that history. The protagonist defeated an adversary who would be totally impossible to defeat in his previous life. He notices that his body and clothes have returned to normal, but the mysterious blue dragon ring remained on his wrist. This accessory was a trophy won from the demonic cult and glowed intensely at the moment of his death. The young man suspects that the bracelet caused his time travel when furious shouts begin to echo from outside. He stands up quickly from the cot, quite intrigued by that sudden confusion outside the room. A furious man demands to see the person responsible for hurting his son, while Hong tries to calm things down by taking the blame. From the room, the protagonist listens to the man threaten to cut all the financial sponsorship that supports the Tail sect. The sect leader begs for forgiveness in a humiliating way, trying to protect the boy at all costs. The arrogant visitor insults the sect and demands severe punishment for the cheeky young man. Jin So-eun watches from behind as his master lowers himself before the merchant to save him from punishment. This scene brings painful memories of when all his companions ended up dead in a tragic way in the war. He remembers the lifeless body of Hong, who in the past suffered the consequences of the cowardly decisions of the leaders. Facing a second chance at life, the protagonist swears that things will be completely different now. He will no longer allow the history of deaths and regrets of his previous life to repeat itself. With renewed determination, the young man breaks the piece of wood that was in his mouth with his teeth. He stretches, demonstrating that he is ready to take the reins of the situation and face the intruder. Jin So-eun gathers his belongings, knowing very well the value of what he carries with him from now on. With a sharp and calculating look, he decides it is time to shake things up and change everyone's destiny. Outside, Hong continues to thank the arrogant merchant for his false generosity as he walks away. The leader of the merchant group murmurs, irritated, saying he will only let that offense slide one single time. Suddenly, the protagonist appears on the roof, calling the attention of the merchant who was on his way out. He greets the visitor with extreme irony, introducing himself with the exact insults he had just heard. The merchant and his henchmen look up, surprised by the audacity of the young man who stares at them from the top of the wall. Jin So-eun jumps off the wall with agility, while the man realizes that he is the one responsible for hurting his son. With total mockery, the protagonist asks why he is being insulted in that manner by someone not so old. The two stare at each other in a comical moment, leaving the merchant speechless before such audacity. He mocks the unnecessary scandal because of a simple blow to the head during a fair training duel. The merchant yells, accusing him of cheating, and states that the only function of the sect is to serve his rich son. The boy retorts, reminding him that the spoiled heir also beat up dozens of other disciples before that day. With an intimidating look, he mocks the rich boy's ability to even enter the prestigious arts academy. The man trembles with so much anger while his servant tries to hold him back before he commits some madness right there. He asks if the protagonist really thinks he can take the responsibility if the sect's sponsorship ends. The protagonist just gives a sly smirk, completely mocking that supposed financial threat. The merchant laughs out loud, saying he can sponsor any other sect and leave theirs starving to death tomorrow. Their sect belonged to an important group in the past, but today it maintained only the title of prestige without the glory. However, the group possessed the exclusive right to nominate one disciple directly to the prestigious Muram Academy. For this reason, the rich heir paid a fortune in sponsorship just to steal this special nomination from their sect. With total disdain, Jin So-eun challenges the man and tells him to go ahead and cut the sponsorship right now. He assumes full responsibility with a smile on his face, but asks an intriguing question to the rich man. The young man grabs the merchant's arm tightly, reminding him that there is little time left for the academy selection. He smiles provocatively, insinuating that the man only chose them because he was rejected by all the other sects. The merchant turns red with shame, while the protagonist recalls how before they accepted any humiliation. He tries to break free, indignant at the insolence of that boy who dared to expose his humiliating truth so crudely. The man yells, desperate, stating that the Muram Alliance no longer cares about a decaying sect like theirs. In the previous life, even after the rich boy entered the academy, the commercial company cut the funding anyway. For this reason, he brings his face close and fires back that the one who really needs salvation, there is the merchant group. The merchant widens his eye, taken by a sudden chill before that deep and intimidating look from the young man. Without giving any further explanation, the protagonist simply turns his back and begins to walk away quietly. Jin So-eun knows very well that begging for protection is useless, for each one needs to have the power to defend themselves alone. The rich merchant cracks with hatred and tries to attack him, but is held back while the young man walks away calmly. This new fearless and confident stance was the biggest lesson he learned after going through his own death. But internally, he realizes with humor that he acted on impulse and still does not know what to do from now on. The day comes to an end with a beautiful sunset in the mountains, announcing that a new journey of training will begin. He travels to a dark and isolated cave in the middle of the forest to begin his secret preparation. Alone in the cave, the protagonist establishes that his only and main goal at the moment is to get stronger. But he recognizes that the basic techniques of his sect are too weak, leaving only one viable path. The plan consists of obtaining overwhelming internal energy by consuming a legendary spiritual fire herb. Thanks to the secret book of the Muram Alliance recorded in his head, he knows the exact location of all the herbs. However, he discovers that the monster guarding the cave is much more frightening and dangerous than the book said. Even fearful, he knows that defeating this creature to obtain the fire ginseng is the first crucial step. He advances emerges wielding his sword and executes the Socheon technique to try to immobilize the monster with a single attack. Realizing that his current strength is insufficient, he gives up on direct confrontation so as not to waste energy unnecessarily. Instead of fighting with the sword, the protagonist decides to use fire, lighting a torch to scare the creature. He breaks into a confident smile, realizing that intelligent strategies are much better than brute force. The fire consumes the monster's nest, proving that the knowledge accumulated in his mind is worth more than skill. The guardian screams in pain while it is burned alive by the flames, with no chance to counterattack the clever boy. The young man watches the victory coldly, knowing that winning at any cost is the only thing that really matters. With his fist clenched and the ring glowing, he gives thanks for the opportunity to finally achieve his goal. He lets out an insane laugh in the heat of the moment, swearing to take revenge on all the traitors of the Murim Alliance. The terrible guardian monster lies completely defeated on the floor of the cave with a blade driven into its head. From the body of the defeated creature begins to emanate a mysterious white smoke, revealing the spiritual ginseng. The young man approaches the location, exhaling determination to finally harvest the fruit of his first great triumph. After consuming the spiritual ginseng, he evaluates the flow of internal energy that begins to circulate in his body. But suddenly, he falls into despair and yells, furious, upon realizing that that amount of power is still not enough. The protagonist laments that even having ingested the entire herb, his body cannot absorb all the energy. He cries, frustrated, blaming the weak meditation technique of his sect and wondering if the problem is himself. Desolate, the young man falls to his knees on the cold floor of the cave, feeling the weight of his apparent physical incapacity. He knows very well that if he continues at this weak pace, he will not be able to change the terrible tragedies of the future. Without sufficient power, he will fail again in the mission to protect the Tail sect from complete destruction. As soon as the bloody war begins, the weakest will again be the first to be sacrificed without mercy. He swears that this time, none of his companions will be used as cannon fodder by the leaders of the Alliance. To save them, the plan requires him to become an influential figure in the Murim Alliance before the conflict begins. Tearing the rock in frustration, he despairs to see that he will not even be able to enter the renowned academy. The protagonist is on the verge of madness, looking desperately for an immediate solution to his dilemma. The constant dripping of the cave makes him reflect on how to obtain and accumulate more energy much faster. Looking at his reflection in the water, he suddenly remembers the existence of an extremely valuable spiritual pill. He recalls that his rival's pill, sent by the MANHWA-YY sect, must be about to arrive just now. In the past, his rival's father spent an immense fortune to buy the legendary Seolmai pill of MANHWA. However, one day before the boy consumed it, the precious pill disappeared mysteriously without leaving any trace. The culprit of the theft was never caught, and the protagonist realizes he has the perfect chance to get it first. Jin So-eun knows that humans always leave traces and begins to hatch an infallible plan to track the mysterious thief. He activates his incredible memory to scour all the possible information he stored from that time in his mind. The boy focuses specifically on the monthly reports of the Happy branch of the Murim Alliance that he memorized in the future. In his thoughts, a red guideline begins to be traced amidst the floating shelves of the gigantic library. The flow of memories crosses infinite corridors of books, directing the young man to the exact document he needs. Analyzing the reports in detail, he knows he will find some hidden clue about the theft of the sacred pill. The protagonist scours entrance records and mission reports of the Alliance, organizing everything systematically. Each scroll and memorized page begins to align, revealing the connections and hidden secrets of that period. Connecting all the facts through pure logical deduction, he finally manages to unravel the mystery behind the theft. In his memories, he analyzes the plaques with the names of the most likely suspects of that intriguing theft. The protagonist joins his hands, demonstrating deep respect and total focus to chart his action plan. He reflects on how having become a living library in the future is being incredibly useful now. With a determined smile, he decrees that he will steal the valuable Seolmi pill before anyone else. At that exact moment, the blue dragon ring on his wrist begins to glow with a mysterious greenish light. The protagonist is confused upon realizing that the energy of the bracelet is reacting to the recently defeated monster. He raises his arm, intrigued by the sudden glow and the strong vibration emanating from his spiritual ring. A dense black fog begins to envelop the artifact, scaring the young man with that unexpected reaction. The bracelet begins to actively suck the remaining vital essence of the inert body of the giant spider. The jewel rips the glowing red core from the creature, channeling all that concentrated power at once. A strong energy barrier forms around the core, while the absorption process intensifies. Jin So-eun is in shock upon realizing that the artifact is, in fact, devouring the monster's energy core. An immense explosion of light illuminates the entire entrance of the cave, scaring the birds that were flying nearby. Inside the darkness, the boy is enveloped by a powerful and frightening red aura of pure energy. The power flows quickly into his energy channels, blending perfectly with his body. The protagonist's eyes glow intensely upon feeling the overwhelming impact of that new internal power. Jin So-eun bursts into laughter and celebrates euphorically that incredible evolution he just witnessed. He remembers that the ring belonged to a powerful blood-sucking demon he defeated in his past life. He kept the bracelet only as a war souvenir, never imagining it would have such a useful function. To test his new vigor, he delivers a quick punch, cutting the wind with immense ease and power. The blow generates a violent shockwave that cracks the stone walls of the cave in a frightening way. The artifact purified the dark energy of the monster, integrating it with total perfection into his sect cultivation. He smiles, relieved upon realizing that his internal energy increased drastically thanks to the cult's treasure. Meanwhile, in the merchant's mansion, people comment on gossip about the expensive pill bought for the heir. Guy Cheol-yong shows off arrogantly, explaining about the immense strengthening power of that rare pill. He brags, saying that even the official disciples have difficulty getting such a precious item. Ignoring the flattery, the young Hong Sarian only worries about the whereabouts and well-being of the protagonist. She recalls with affection and apprehension the day of the great duel that changed the behavior of her sect companion. Sarian laments not having fought in his place, since she considers herself the only one responsible for the future of that place. In the first timeline, the protagonist had abandoned the sect after being expelled due to all that confusion. The spoiled heir continues mocking and calling the protagonist an idiot while walking away laughing. Suddenly, the little disciples run excitedly toward the young woman, bringing plates full of delicious food. A little boy offers a plate of succulent meat with a huge smile on his face, leaving the young woman surprised. Sarian watches the boys with affection while they eat the treats of the great celebration happily. From afar, Guy Cheol-yong looks irritated and promises to take revenge on all the disciples as soon as the party ends. Sarian smiles sweetly and tells the little ones to eat well, because she knows they are very hungry. One of the children realizes that the young woman is pensive and asks if she is thinking of Jin So-eun again. Sarian is completely embarrassed and flushed upon being exposed by the clever little disciples. The boys suggest saving a rice cake and a piece of Jin So-eun's favorite meat for when he returns. A tender smile appears on the young woman's lips upon realizing the immense affection everyone feels for the protagonist. But she quickly disguises her emotion, taking a big bite of the food and making everyone laugh. Joking, she threatens to eat everything alone if the boys do not hurry to savor the festive banquet. The boys yell jokingly and begin to devour the plates as fast as they can. Seeing the contagious joy of the children, Sarian wonders where the protagonist could be mixed up at a time like this. She mentally calls him a big idiot while observing the beautiful decorative lanterns of the festival. Night falls over the village, illuminated by red lanterns under the light of a beautiful full moon in the starry sky. Inside the main hall, the merchant leader raises his cup of drink, celebrating with all the guests. The guests toast happily, laughing out loud, and enjoying the luxurious party paid for by the rich commercial company. Dancers perform gracefully in the central courtyard, entertaining the public amidst flower petals. Far from there, a swift shadow jumps silently across the dark rooftops toward its secret target. The mysterious masked thief jumps nimbly across the rooftops, fleeing sneakily in the middle of the night. He uses a special rope to swing and disappear quickly into the dense darkness of the treetops. Upon landing safely in the forest, the intruder lets out a muffled giggle, celebrating the success of the plan. It is the soul hunter Ju Jang-mook, who mocks the ease of robbing the warehouse of the rich commercial company. He opens the decorated box anxiously, revealing the shiny and coveted Seolmai pill inside. Ju Jang-mook trembles with excitement upon contemplating that valuable treasure, which is now in his blood-stained hands. He plans to use the pill to obtain the necessary power, without realizing that he is being watched by Jin So-eun. The hunter decides to flee in a hurry, but is suddenly surprised by a deadly attack coming from the middle of the shadows. Ju Jang-mook is coldly beheaded in a single blow by a mysterious warrior who appears suddenly. The assassin retrieves the pill box, falsely lamenting the death of the hunter he just slaughtered. Holding the prize, he says with a macabre smile that he needs that pill anyway for his plans. He mocks the corpse, saying that unfortunately, things in the world of martial arts work in this cruel way. Putting the case away, the warrior warns his companion that they need to clean the crime scene without leaving traces. The narrative returns a few days before the robbery, when Jin So-eun was planning his meticulous hunting preparations. He had visited an old local hunting shop specializing in heavy and dangerous bear traps. The experienced, rustic-looking shopkeeper turns around, surprised by the unusual request of a young client. Jin So-eun enters the establishment, justifying that he heard about the sale of hard-to-find merchandise. With an enigmatic smile, the boy asks directly if the shopkeeper has traps designed to catch people. The hunter finds the request bizarre, but smiles, thinking the protagonist is an extremely interesting and eccentric client. He states that his shop in Hopby has devices to capture anything from small rabbits to gigantic bears. The boy places a bag of coins on the counter, ordering the largest bear traps available in the stock. He demands highly sensitive and destructive equipment, capable of severing a bear's paw with a light touch. With a bizarre expression, he even jokes about wanting something that sends the target straight to the other world. The shopkeeper feels a terrible chill in his intuition, but decides to ignore the warning to close that good deal. Back to the present forest, the protagonist observes silently the man who just beheaded the hunter. The assassin scorns the fame of the soul hunter, commenting that he thought that battle would be much more difficult. He celebrates the successful robbery, exhibiting a wide smile of satisfaction while holding the precious case. At that moment, another man approaches, congratulating his partner on the beautiful execution and the treasure in hand. These are two members of the 5 Swords of Jeomchang, who laugh at the ease with which they obtain the pill. They plan to hide the hunter's corpse to make it look like he simply disappeared without leaving a trace. The partner suggests taking a look at the valuable MANHWA pill before they begin cleaning the crime scene. They open the red box, amazed at the purple glow that emanates from that magical medicinal sphere. One of them praises the aroma of the pill, while the protagonist appears silently behind the duo without them noticing. Upon noticing a third masked person in their midst, the two traitors make a hilarious grimace of absolute panic. One of them attacks furiously, delivering a swift blow that the protagonist manages to dodge easily by jumping backward. With incredible agility, the young man displays the box in his hand, revealing that he managed to rob them without them noticing. The leader of the group yells, furious, ordering his partner to chase and capture the masked intruder immediately. The opponent advances with his blade shining, yelling that the protagonist will pay dearly for that extreme audacity. Jin So-eun just dodges the deadly blow and begins to run swiftly toward the dark thickness of the forest. He yells back, provoking the pursuers and accusing them of having stolen the precious item first. The pursuer executes a large jump, delivering a destructive vertical blow with his sharp sword. Jin So-eun dodges skillfully at the last second, making the blade hit only the sandy ground. The young man mocks and warns the opponent in a friendly way to take great care where he steps. In the next instant, the huge iron trap closes violently, severing the warrior's leg entirely. The other partner who was watching the chase from afar is completely horrified upon hearing the screams of pain. The protagonist watches the scene with a cold look, celebrating mentally the perfect success of his trap. The hit warrior sweats with extreme agony while trying to contain the hemorrhage of his lacerated leg. A terrible scream of pain echoes throughout the forest, scaring the animals of that deserted area in the middle of the night. Jin So-eun mocks, saying that he had just warned them to take great care with the path. The enemy leader grinds his teeth, furious, calling the masked boy a total coward for using such low tricks. The enemy leader points his blade, furious, demanding that the young man remove the mask and reveal his true identity. Jin So-eun just questions in a cynical way while picking up a small stone from the ground in a subtle manner. He mocks, asking if they really expected him to stand there reciting cliched speeches about his master's lineage. The young man kicks the stone toward the adversaries, demonstrating absolute disdain for combat formalities. The stone hits precisely the trigger of another huge hidden iron trap, making it fire with a bang. The swordsman grinds his teeth in panic, realizing the tactical intelligence and extreme coldness of the opponent. He introduces himself as the new owner of the pill and states that the two will be handed over as the hunter's assassin. He recalls that he unraveled the crime by noticing the hunter's disappearance right after the pill's theft in the Alliance's notes. He investigated the records, looking for any warrior who had a sudden increase in internal energy in the same period. That was how he discovered that the hunter was murdered and that the pill had been divided between two traitors. The enemy trembles with dread, realizing that his secret identity was totally unmasked by the boy. The protagonist confirms coldly that he knows very well the famous 5 swords of the prestigious Jeomchang sect. The desperate villain tries to threaten him with the revenge of his sect and with the implacable wrath of the Murim alliance. Jin So-eun retorts, mocking the idea of thieves who just committed a murder clamoring for the alliance's justice. The enemy leader ignores the provocations and advances, delivering a violent punch against the masked protagonist. He hits the ground with full force, believing that the bear traps will not work against an agile warrior. However, the strong impact makes dozens of camouflaged traps jump through the air around the two. The villain smiles confidently, trying to dodge the metal claws that fly in his direction from all shapes. He tries to use his agility to dodge the triggers, but realizes too late the immense quantity of traps. The opponent cracks with hatred and swears to tear off his mask and quarter him limb by limb as soon as he corners him. Jin So-eun just remains in silence, maintaining his calculating posture while the enemy advances confidently. Suddenly, the protagonist turns and pretends to flee again, running toward the area covered with foliage. The two traitors set off in immediate pursuit, alerting each other about the dangers of that dense foliage. The leader mocks, saying that it is enough to step exactly in the same locations where the masked boy left his footprints. The companion praises the cunning of his older brother while jumping with precision to copy every move of his. The chase advances at high speed, with the two warriors copying the fugitive's footprints to the millimeter. They believe piously that they will be totally safe if they do not deviate from that marked path on the ground. The enemies laugh, bragging about having overcome the tactical trap strategy of the boy so easily. However, the protagonist executes a perfect jump into the air, revealing that everything was part of his plan. He lands with ease while observing from afar the duo walking directly to the end of their journey. The villains continue celebrating the supposed victory without realizing they fell into the most terrible of ambushes. Suddenly, the leader steps falsely into an unprotected area, activating the metal claws at the same instant. The protagonist's cold look reflects the imminent fall of his arrogant opponents in the middle of the dark forest. He knows very well that greed and pride would be the ruin of those corrupt warriors of the Jumchang sect. Jin So-eun observes in absolute silence the devastating consequences he prepared meticulously for the two. The sharp iron closes with brutality, lacerating the lower limbs of both pursuers at the same time. The leader screams, horrified, upon feeling the unbearable pain of the blades cutting his tendons without a chance of defense. The two fall, bloody and moaning in pain on the forest floor, without understanding how they fell into that deadly trap. Jin So-eun approaches calmly, wielding his sword, and mocks the supposed tactical intelligence of the adversaries. He reveals, laughing, that to escape those traps they should have stepped with millimeter precision on the marks. The villain sweats with dread upon realizing that the protagonist planned the density of traps in such an insane way. He asks, horrified, how a simple young man managed to calculate and move in such a perfect and precise manner. The protagonist unsheathes his gleaming blade with total coldness, knowing very well what is the secret behind this. He knows that this absolute control is due to his incredible memory, the only and greatest gift the heavens gave him. Blood splashes across the trees under the light of the full moon, marking the tragic end of those two traitors of the sect. The scene changes to the following day, showing the beautiful and imposing headquarters of the Tail sect located in the Hapi region. Inside the location, a mysterious person holds a cup of hot tea while reflecting on the last facts. This is the chief strategist of the Murim Alliance, who analyzes coldly the political progress of the allied sects. He talks with an influential guest about the current situation of decay and prestige of the old Tail sect. They agree that it is high time to replace that bankrupt group with a new influential and powerful sect. They discuss rumors that a new force called the Iron Sword sect is growing in the region. The advisor serves a special tea, confirming that the political gossip within the Murim Alliance was real. He reminds them that an official sect of the 100 Gates can only be replaced if it commits an extremely grave crime. The suspicion then arises that the decaying Teal sect might be involved in some type of severe infraction. The advisor reveals that there are serious rumors about them selling their special nomination for money. He questions if the sect used its old prestige cowardly to commit such a shameful financial fraud. The visitor smiles maliciously upon hearing that they acted only to satisfy their own greed. He ponders if the group really betrayed its principles as sacred warriors because of selfish interest. They find it outrageous that an old sect of prestige has stooped so low just for gold coins. The scene changes to a busy local inn, where gossip of the martial arts world runs wild. The advisor and the visitor continue talking at a reserved table, far from curious ears. The nobleman asks not to be misunderstood, denying that he wants to favor another sect in a dishonest way. But his tense and sweaty look demonstrates that there is a strong, hidden personal interest behind his words. He states that the old privileges were only granted to honor the alliances of battles of the past. He pretends to be deeply sad as a member of the alliance with the moral decay of that traditional group. The man extends the cup, lamenting that the true meaning of the official sects has been tarnished. Meanwhile, in the dark inn, the protagonist rests and plans his next steps under the starry sky. He closes his eyes, concentrating deeply to perform a complex process of internal cultivation. Sitting shirtless and with his back turned, the young man releases a massive amount of smoke and bluish spiritual energy. The protagonist sweats cold, concentrating every drop of willpower to completely absorb the power obtained. He focuses his spiritual energy on his internal channels, ensuring absolute control over the energy flow. After much effort, the boy finally manages to stabilize the entire flow, reaching a new level of power. The young man celebrates upon feeling that the MANHWA pill exceeded all his strengthening expectations. He celebrates, laughing out loud upon realizing that he already surpassed the level of energy he possessed in his past life. Satisfied with the incredible result, the young man puts on his clothes and begins to descend the wooden steps. Upon reaching the hall, he spots the inn attendant sleeping, tired, on top of one of the wooden tables. The girl wakes up, scared, and is extremely relieved to see that the young master finally came out of the room. She comments, worried, that he spent days locked in the room, and the protagonist asks for any type of food. The employee stutters, surprised, saying that the establishment's kitchen is already closed at that late hour. The protagonist just smiles in a snobbish way and places a generous stack of silver coins on the table. The girl runs happily to wake the cook, proving to the protagonist that money can solve everything. He thanks mentally for having used the spiritual ring to ensure that good financial reserve. In his memories appears the image of a ferocious wild tiger that he faced to test his new powers. The boy recalls that the spiritual ring did not work only against demons, but against any creature. It could drain the vital strength of the forest beasts and absorb it directly for his own cultivation. As an extra benefit, he still managed to make a large amount of money selling the rare skins. Although he was rich and powerful, the young man knows that he still needs to solve an extremely delicate problem. The power of the bracelet to drain the life of others could be easily confused with a forbidden technique of the cult. This hidden ability was extremely dangerous and could put him in the crosshairs of all the Alliance leaders. If they discover about this power, he knows that it will not be just him who will suffer with the implacable punishment of the Alliance. The entire Ta'il sect would be running a terrible risk, and for this reason he could never let himself be discovered. His deep thoughts are interrupted by the attendant who returns happily, bringing plates full of food. The protagonist has his mouth watering and begins to devour everything with great haste, feeling extremely hungry. The attendants whisper, amused, to see the boy eat with such will and haste without paying attention to anything else. One of them approaches, curious, asking if he has heard about the new rumors circulating in the city. She cites the great banquet that the merchants recently organized to celebrate the purchase of the rare pill. The young woman reveals, excited, that the valuable medicinal item was mysteriously stolen right in the middle of the celebration. She praises the incredible skill of the hidden thief and tells that the Murim Alliance sent investigators to the location. Upon hearing about the arrival of investigators from the Alliance, the protagonist chokes on his food from such a scare. He drinks a little water, pretending to be calm, and asks what the authorities decided to do from now on. He chokes and asks, apprehensive, if the investigators found any clue or if they already captured the true thief. The protagonist enters a silent panic, thinking it would be a complete disaster if they caught some innocent person in his place. Fortunately, the attendant answers that the investigators lost the trail quickly and were unable to discover anything. Jin So-un lets out an immense sigh of relief and then disguises it, commenting with cynicism that the owner must be devastated. The attendant tells that the party ended early, but that there will be a new great banquet in Hotby very soon. He is surprised and tense upon hearing that the new commemoration will be organized precisely by the Iron Sword sect. She tells happily that the party for the 60th anniversary of their leader will last 7 days, moving the entire region. Jin So-un immediately recalls that infamous anniversary banquet of his previous life with quite a bit of bitterness. In his memories of the past, the boy relives the terrible humiliation that his family suffered at that cursed event. He remembers the arrogant face of the rival sect leader who enjoyed himself at the expense of others' suffering. He recalls the painful moment when his beloved father was forced to kneel and be humiliated before everyone. His father had to apologize publicly to the rival leader in a way that was extremely degrading and cruel. All that shame and suffering had been caused solely by his own guilt and weakness in the past. He blames himself bitterly for having been the main reason for that terrible ordeal experienced by his father. Clenching his fists with fury, he swears with all his soul that this time the destiny will be totally rewritten. Determined, the young man decides that under no circumstances will he set foot in the territory of that arrogant sect. He stands up abruptly, thanking for the meal, and leaving the attendant quite confused by his sudden departure. Without looking back, he walks toward the exit while the girl calls him, worried, not understanding anything. He runs in a hurry, swearing that he will never allow his father to go through any type of humiliation because of him. However, destiny plays tricks, and he finds himself suddenly fighting in the middle of that infamous anniversary banquet. Heavy blades clash violently, generating intense sparks in the heat of a fierce and swift combat. He finds himself in a deadly duel against the arrogant grandson of the leader of the Iron Sword sect himself. The story then rewinds a few days, showing the daily and peaceful training routine at the Teol sect. One of the young disciples collapses, exhausted, on the stone steps, complaining that his legs are aching too much. These are the brothers known as Gold, Silver, and Bronze, who rest tired after the exhausting training session. He complains about having to train under the strong sun and questions if the movements really help to improve his tech. The brothers joke among themselves, provoking each other about having found the protagonist's acting in the duel incredible. They laugh and change the subject, moving on to wonder what the young master would be doing at that exact moment. The smallest of the boys comments, worried, that this is the first time the boy has disappeared for more than a week without warning. Another disciple jokes, suggesting that he is perhaps ashamed to return after having caused all that confusion. However, they know the boy is not one to flee and continue waiting anxiously for his return to the sect. They praise the good heart of the protagonist, acting with so much drama that it almost seems that he has passed away for real. Suddenly, the youngest spots a known silhouette and points happily, announcing the return of the young master. Jin Soan majestically crosses the great gates of the Teol sect, carrying heavy luggage on his back. He knows that avoiding the event will spare his father, but reflects that that was only one of many humiliations suffered. The headquarters of Hopbi, once glorious, needed to recover its respect and strength so as not to be ridiculed by anyone anymore. Looking at the imposing plaque of the sect, the protagonist feels the weight of the responsibility to protect that legacy. He decides firmly that no one from the sect should attend that infamous anniversary banquet of the rival. While thinking of a convincing excuse to avoid the event, the young man is spotted by the noisy disciple. The boys run excitedly toward him, demanding explanations about his long disappearance of more than a week. They surround the boy, enthusiastic, begging for him to teach them the incredible movements used in the previous duel. The protagonist smiles sweetly, stroking the heads of the little ones and asking if everyone has been behaving well. Suddenly, a furious shout interrupts the warm reception, making the young man shiver from fright at the same instant. This is his father, Jin Taesan, the master of the external hall, who stares at him with his arms crossed in a very severe way. Upon seeing his father alive and well, the protagonist cannot contain his tears and cries with immense emotion and relief. He runs, desperate, to throw himself into his father's arms, celebrating the beauty of having received that second chance. But instead of an affectionate hug, his father delivers a nice knock to his head, scolding the cheeky young man. He rants that the confusion with the mercantile company almost left the entire sect homeless and in the gutter. Meanwhile, Gae Cheol-yong discovers about the boy's return and cracks with hatred at the unexpected news. The arrogant rival appears, demanding a new fair fight, believing he will manage his revenge easily this time. The protagonist opens a scary and confident smile, demonstrating that he is anxious to begin the next combat. Instead of fighting, he pretends to be dazzled by the non-existent shine of the rival, leaving the rich boy not understanding anything. With extreme mockery, the young man mocks the great pill that he knows very well was stolen and now belongs to him. The opponent turns red with anger and humiliation upon realizing that he is being ridiculed in front of everyone. He walks away, furious, while Hong Seryeon questions the motive for Jin So-eun having provoked the boy about the stolen pill. The boy's father and the young woman watch him, worried, thinking his recent behavior is bizarre and out of the ordinary. Jin So-eun opens his luggage, full of expensive sweets and treats, making the little children of the sect happy. His father complains that he should have bought rice instead of sweets, while Hong suspects where the money came from. The young woman grumbles quietly, relieved at his return, and admitting that deep down he cares a lot about the sect. She explains that the merchant company is too busy with the investigations of the robbery to bother them. The girl approaches with teary eyes, begging for him to never disappear again without telling anyone. Jin So-eun is embarrassed and flushed upon realizing the genuine concern of his companion for his safety. He finds the exaggerated drama of hers funny, but decides to stay quiet so as not to spoil that rare moment of truce. The relaxed mood changes when his father reveals suddenly that the Teol sect decided to attend the rival banquet. The protagonist is tense inside, knowing that the decision to go to that infamous event has already been taken by the master. He tries desperately to hatch a good justification in his brilliant mind to prevent this disastrous trip. The boy's father turns his back abruptly, leaving the son and the young woman pensive in the middle of the training courtyard. To everyone's surprise, the master announces that he will go to the banquet alone, demanding that the son and the others stay at the sect. One of the little disciples pulls the protagonist's garments, asking what happened to his father suddenly. The little boy extends a small bundle containing a simple piece of rice cake, kept with affection. Jin So-eun widens his eyes upon recognizing the rice cake that had been distributed at the merchant's banquet. The boy tells with shyness that he saved the treat just to be able to eat together with his dear master, whom he missed. The simple treat kept with so much affection touches deeply the heart of the protagonist, who feels very grateful. The young man opens a tender smile, demonstrating all his gratitude for that gesture of affection so pure and innocent. Without hesitating, he devours the rice cake in one go, making the young Hong Saryeon let out a scream of such The protagonist praises the delicious taste of the treat, leaving the little boy indignant for him having eaten everything alone. He apologizes, laughing, and promises to give all his stock of expensive sweets to reward the boy in a generous way. Little Dong Ryong widens his eyes, shining with happiness upon hearing that he will have the right to all those sweets. The children run happily to dispute the treats while Jin So-eun observes the courtyard with a warmed heart. The young man reflects that the danger of the rival sect will continue to torment everyone if they do not take a definitive attitude. He realizes that just fleeing the event will not solve the problem and decides to totally change his tactical strategy. The protagonist refuses to let the children of the sect go through the same humiliations he suffered before. He exhibits a fearless smile and decrees that all of them will indeed attend the banquet of the Iron Sword sect. The day of the great commemoration finally arrives, with dozens of luxurious carriages going up toward the enemy headquarters. Among the guests, the protagonist walks calmly, attracting the attentive eyes of the other sects of Hap. Upon spotting the main portal, he is alerted about the importance of remaining calm in the face of any provocation. This is the hallmaster Kang Chae-seok, who yells desperately, demanding that he does not commit any madness. The boy mocks the excessive concern, asking if the hallmaster only came to the event to watch him closely. The man complains that it was the boy himself who insisted on participating in that commemoration at the last minute without warning. Jin So-eun complains that people always provoke him while the hallmaster continues to scold his behavior. The protagonist complains in a comical tone, saying that the hallmaster has been grumbling exactly like his father. Jin So-eun notes that his father has remained extremely silent and pensive since they decided to make that trip. The hallmaster delivers another knock on the boy, irritated with the mocking tone and the insolent provocations of the young man. The boy complains about having to hear that old, embarrassing story of his childhood one more time while they walk. Suddenly, an arrogant group from another sect appears, pushing and demanding that they open space at the entrance gate. The hallmaster protests, irritated with the lack of education of that group that tries to cut the line in a brazen way. Kang Chae-seok points his finger, scolding the audacity of the invaders without caring about the prestige of their sect. The leader of the rival group calms his disciples and tries to justify with disdain the reason for them cutting the line. With an extremely cynical smile, the man introduces himself proudly as Gu Yang-sa of the famous Cheongjuk Company. Those present tremble upon recognizing the influential name of that large martial arts commercial corporation. The leader of the caravan apologizes humbly and yields his turn upon recognizing the influential Cheongjuk Company. Jin So-eun observes the situation with an attentive look upon hearing the name of the powerful Cheongjuk Company. He recalls that the son of the owner of that company would become a great ally of the arrogant Gai Cheol-yong. In the past, that cowardly duo used to treat all the disciples of the Teal sect like mere employees. The arrogant young men laugh out loud, mocking the presence of the members of the sect and the reaction of the merchant leader. They continue the insults, questioning how such a decaying sect is still part of the famous 108 Peaks. Jin So-eun appears silently from behind and places his hands on the shoulders of the two men who were mocking them. With an ironic smile, the boy asks if they could repeat the name of that company that he has never heard of. Gu Yang-sa is in complete shock and without reaction before such audacity coming from that unknown young man. The hallmaster of friendly appearance decides to join in the mockery, pretending to try to remember where he has heard about that group. While everyone present sweats with pure nervousness, the protagonist continues to pretend he is thinking about the company. Jin So-eun retorts with a sneer that he probably heard that name while he was using the public restroom. The bold response leaves everyone around him extremely startled and unsure of how to react to such an insult. Gu Yang-sa grips the hilt of his sword with extreme anger, trembling with hatred over the humiliation he just endured. The young man draws his weapon, furious, shouting that he will not forgive anyone who dares to insult his important family. Suddenly, elegant footsteps begin to echo through the courtyard, followed by a female voice questioning all the commotion. The furious opponent keeps his sword pointed directly at the protagonist, who remains completely calm. A beautiful and imposing young woman approaches, drawing the attention of everyone present, who start whispering non-stop. She asks in a firm and serious tone of voice if all the guests really came there just to fight. Seong Moran asks in an intimidating manner if they intend to shed blood on the very day of her grandfather's banquet. The influential Iron Sword sect was a new force that had grown rapidly in recent times. Both sects shared the same region, and the rival group did not intend to stop until they became the sole absolute leader. Their main goal was to take the prestigious place of the Tail sect within the coveted 108 peaks. The protagonist remembers that he accepted an unfair duel with the rival leader's grandson in the past, knowing he would lose. He remembers when his beloved father knelt publicly to beg for forgiveness before all their rivals. Faced with this new opportunity, Jin So-un knows that things must be completely different from his past life. The young woman, Seong Moran, demands an immediate explanation as to why they are causing such a scene at the gate. She insists on knowing if the party guests really came there, hoping to see some kind of bloodshed. The adversary is completely flushed in the face of the young woman's beauty and tries to place all the blame on the protagonist. However, the beautiful young woman ignores him coldly and sharply orders him to go back to the end of the waiting line. She introduces herself formally as Seong Moran and offers sincere apologies for the inappropriate behavior of her guests. To make up for what happened, she personally offers to guide the protagonist group into the grand hall. The entire entourage walks impressively through the beautiful stone corridors under the leadership of the young hostess. The leader of the merchants takes the opportunity to shower her with compliments, saying that her beauty exceeds all the rumors. She modestly thanks him for the compliment and warns that the young sect leader is already waiting anxiously inside. Jin So-un becomes reflective, knowing that in his past life, that mysterious young woman never had contact with his sect. The protagonist suspects that she might have some hidden intention as the group finally arrives at the grand hall. His companions are amazed by the size of the headquarters, which seems much larger than in the previous timeline. He knows that such rapid growth does not happen for no reason, and decides to continue observing everything with extreme caution. The main hall of the event is completely packed with guests who are drinking and laughing loudly and happily. The young master observes the powerful sect leader and his heir sitting in a place of honor at the main table. The merchant leader greets the hosts very respectfully, demonstrating his great courtesy. The rival heir returns the greeting with a burst of laughter and asks them to set aside rigid formalities. He continues laughing loudly while ironically lamenting that he does not have such talent in his own group. The man expresses envy at seeing the Taeul sect possess such valuable treasures just because of their ancient privileges. The young woman, Seong Moran, formally introduces the representatives of the Taeul sect to her father, who observes them with disdain. The heir of the rival sect lets out a thoughtful grunt, staring at the visitors with a serious and intimidating gaze. The leaders of the Taeul sect perform a formal bow, while the hosts try to recall memories from the past. The man mentions suddenly that it has been more than 20 years since a mysterious incident occurred in the past. Jin So-un becomes extremely intrigued upon hearing the mention of that mysterious event from 20 years ago. The rival heir asks how Master Hong is, commenting that the girl next to him must be his daughter. He mocks the two youths, saying they do not seem to have a future, and questioning if they are the best disciples. The man scoffs, saying that one cannot expect much from those who train at the Taeul sect. The rival master continues his attack and warns that he does not want to see the rich young man learning the techniques of that sect. He lets out a hysterical laugh, stating that training with them would only turn the boy into a third-rate warrior. Jin So-un interrupts the laughter, commenting calmly and ironically that the rival seems like nothing more than a street bully. The protagonist states openly that every word that comes out of that man's mouth is incredibly irritating. The rival leader turns red with anger and shouts, demanding to know what kind of nonsense the boy is saying. The protagonist offers a cynical apology, saying that he was just thinking out loud and the comment slipped out by mistake. The hallmaster desperately asks the young man to keep his cool in the face of the enemy's obvious provocations. Jin So-un asks directly what actually happened 20 years ago to make the master so worried. The experienced hallmaster hesitates to answer, demonstrating that the subject of the past is extremely delicate. He swallows hard in the midst of a tense silence, revealing that talking about that will bring back very bad memories. Seong Moran interrupts the conversation with a beautiful smile and offers to guide them to a better table inside. The hallmaster thanks her with relief for her kindness and pulls the youths to follow the young woman as quickly as possible. They are taken to a comfortable reserved table with a beautiful view of a lake covered in lotus flowers. The table is overflowing with luxurious banquets that most common people would never have the chance to experience. Jin So-un is suspicious of her sudden kindness and asks why she is not receiving the important leaders of the event. She explains casually that local rules do not allow women to participate in political matters. The rival master has two heirs. The eldest eldest being the powerful and feared warrior Seong Mo-hyun. The second heir of the prestigious family was the young woman herself, who was sitting there talking with them. The older brother received all the investment and was seen by everyone as the natural heir to the sect's leadership. Although she started her training very late, she was talented enough to get into the elite academy. Savoring the food, Jin So-eun comments on the rumors that her skills surpass those of her arrogant brother. She laughs sweetly and asks if the young man has been researching her life with such interest. While the hallmaster takes the opportunity to eat, the young woman offers sincere apologies for her father's rude attitude. She jokes, suggesting they hand the rich boy over to her sect, making everyone at the table laugh. The protagonist stops eating for a moment and warns that there is something that truly intrigues him. He asked directly what the true intention of her sect was when they invited the Tail sect to that banquet. The young woman just gives an enigmatic smirk, keeping her true intentions hidden. She responds by philosophizing about how banquets only make real sense if they have many guests gathered together. The young man retorts coldly, reminding her that historically, most assassinations occur precisely at banquets. The young woman's look changes subtly as she realizes that the young man is much more perceptive than he appears. She praises the young man's perceptiveness and warns that, unfortunately, she needs to withdraw to attend to other commitments. With elegance and politeness, she performs a formal farewell bow before leaving the reserved table. She walks away, leaving the hallmaster and the protagonist's young companion quite thoughtful about the conversation. Saryeon turns her face away, pouting, demonstrating slight jealousy of the attention the protagonist gave to the beautiful hostess. Inside, the night banquet remains very busy, with several young men trying to woo the beautiful young woman. They beg in a fawning way for her to join their tables during the celebration of that great night. Each one tries to catch the girl's attention, competing for space and making absurd proposals in an embarrassing way. Suddenly, one of the maids of the mansion starts screaming in desperation, looking for the young mistress amidst the crowd. She screams, warning that the older brother is desperately looking for her for the event preparations. On the dark roof, the girl enjoys a sweet, relieved to have escaped all that unnecessary flattery. She reflects on how Jin So-eun demonstrated unusual courage and did not lower himself before any of the leaders. The young woman bites her sweet, wondering if the young man truly does not fear the power of her sect or if he is just crazy. Her calm reflections are interrupted when she spots a very strange movement happening in the courtyard right below. She realizes that the girl from the Taeol sect and the arrogant boy are quietly moving away toward the forest. She remembers that her brother had planned to organize a drinking party exclusively for the younger ones. However, she finds it very suspicious that only the two of them are leaving without the company of the group's astute protagonist. With a look of pure amusement on her face, the young woman decides to follow the two to see the outcome of that situation. Someone knocks lightly on the sliding door of the protagonist's room, asking who is on the other side. He opens the door, surprised to see the unexpected visitor who decided to show up at that time of night. He stutters, surprised to see the young Seong Moran standing in front of his room in the middle of the night. She personally invites him to participate in a reserved meeting just for the young talents of the night. The young man politely refuses the invitation, claiming that he and his companions are exhausted after the long day. The young woman smiles mysteriously and asks if all the members of the sect are really resting right now. She reveals that she just saw the young Hong Saryeon walking alone directly toward that location. Jin So-eun remembers that in his past life, he accepted the provoked duel and that it brought great humiliation to his father. That was precisely the reason why he wanted to avoid at all costs attending that dangerous banquet. He realizes that now he has no choice, as he cannot leave his companion alone in a likely trap. The two begin to walk together hurriedly toward the location of the young warrior's banquet. She asks, quite intrigued, if he really believes that her sect would be capable of preparing an ambush. The protagonist asks if she is just playing dumb, or if she is really oblivious to her own family's action. He remembers that she does not participate in political decisions and wonders if she is truly out of the loop. The young woman silently admits that the Taeol sect is seen as a big thorn in her family's side. She states with a proud tone that her sect would never act so lowly and cowardly against their guests. Jin So-eun just lets out a sarcastic smirk, not really believing the young woman's proud words. He predicts with absolute certainty that her brother will use the event to try to destroy his sect's reputation by force. He warns that her brother will do anything to turn the Taeol sect into the big joke of that party night. Offended, she says she misjudged the boy, thinking he was just a paranoid youth with a persecution complex. He walks away calmly, replying that he would truly love it if all that were nothing more than pure paranoia on his part. The young warrior's banquet takes place in a beautiful, fully illuminated pavilion in the middle of a serene lake. Inside, a young warrior speaks in a provocative tone, drawing the attention of all the guests. He mocks the fact that the decadent Taiyul sect still maintains its prestigious seat in the 108 peaks. He says that even the rich merchant guild is forced to associate with their sect just because of the privileges. The other young men start laughing loudly at Hong Saryeon, mocking the fact that she cannot counter anything. She endures the humiliation in silence, knowing that, unfortunately, there is no lie in those men's provocations. The arrogant speaker raises his drink, celebrating the apparent moral defeat of the rival sect in front of everyone. He places the cup of drink right in front of the young woman's face, demanding that she declare the official surrender of her sect. The young man distills all his venom and asks if her sect agrees that stagnant and dirty water should be discarded. Saryeon panics and starts sweating from extreme nervousness, not knowing how to get out of that terrible situation. Pressured and trembling with fear, she ends up yielding and agreeing with the humiliating statement of the provocateurs. Suddenly, the protagonist appears, kicking the door and sliding triumphantly into the banquet hall. Those present recognize the boy who caused the commotion in the courtyard and are surprised to see Seong Moran right behind him. The host tries to woo the young woman, but she refuses coldly, saying she came only to escort a special guest. Gaye Cheolyong panics totally upon seeing the protagonist accompanied by one of the most important figures of the sect. The arrogant speaker shouts, offended, asking if the young man did not hear his superior speaking directly to him. Jin So-eun retorts, asking if someone who stands still watching his sect be humiliated deserves to be called a superior. Saryeon tries to calm the spirits, shouting and asking why the protagonist decided to appear there suddenly. With a funny face, he answers in a relaxed way that he only came because he was worried about her well-being. He looks away and notices that while everyone is having fun humiliating his sect, two important figures ignore everything. These are two great geniuses of martial arts who continue drinking peacefully without paying attention to the rest. One of them is Namgung-san, the legendary and extremely talented eldest son of one of the most powerful families. By his side is the heir, Seong Mo-hyun, the most feared and relentless warrior of the Iron Sword sect. The provocateur from before returns to bother him, mocking the protagonist's presence and his meddling in the matter. With a sneering smile, he asks if the boy decided to show up there just to answer in his sister's place. Jin So-eun maintains a totally neutral and cold expression, demonstrating that he is not shaken by cheap provocations. He approaches the table and grabs a large roasted chicken leg, reaffirming calmly that he agrees with the analogy. The rival is confused while the protagonist explains that a lake really needs clean water to remain clean. He takes a big bite of the meat and, with a sharp gaze, prepares to deliver a devastating argument against his rival. He states that this only applies if the new water is clean, citing the Cheongjuk company itself as an example. He asks why that influential company still remains outside the group of the 108 peaks. The protagonist reveals, laughing, that the real reason is a bloody incident that occurred 60 years ago. The provocateur goes completely pale with shock upon realizing that the boy knows his family's secret. Jin So-eun remembers that in the past, the brothers of that company drew their swords against each other. He pours his drink calmly, making it clear that they are indeed very strong and skilled. But he mocks, saying that he would never trust his back in combat to people who have tried to kill each other before. He slams his drink cup onto the table with full force, demonstrating his complete rejection of that proposal. The protagonist states with a big, sneering smile that he prefers to politely decline that partnership. The other guests sweat cold upon realizing the gravity of the revelation the boy made in the middle of the banquet. Furious, the opponent advances quickly and grabs the collar of Jin So-eun's clothes with all his anger. He bellows with hatred, questioning how the boy dares to unearth the biggest shameful secret of his commercial clan. An extremely cold voice echoes from the back of the hall, asking what he thinks he is doing in that place. The boy releases the protagonist's collar immediately and starts stuttering from pure panic in front of the rival leader. Seong Mo-hyun approaches, saying that disrespecting a guest in that manner is a terrible insult. He states with a scary look that treating a guest badly is the same as spitting in the face of his own sect. Moran tries to defend the boy, but her brother harshly orders her to stay out of that serious discussion. He accuses Jin So-eun of having distorted the entire conversation on purpose to turn it into something shameful. Saryeon tries to take the blame to avoid the worst, but the protagonist interrupts her, asking for formal apologies. He apologizes unexpectedly, saying he ended up ruining what should have been a fun banquet. The boy performs a formal bow with his head down, saying he has no excuse for his behavior. Moran is left completely speechless, unable to believe the protagonist's sudden change in attitude. Jin So-eun also asks the commercial company boy for an apology, admitting that he completely overstepped his bounds. He warns that he will withdraw immediately and asks everyone else to continue enjoying the great party. He calls his companion to leave there, and the girl follows him quickly without understanding absolutely anything. However, the cold voice of Seong Mo-hyun echoes through the hall, ordering them to stop immediately in the middle of the path. He states that allowing someone to leave after committing a terrible offense would ruin the sect's reputation. He reminds everyone of his proud title of official disciple and direct heir to that powerful sect. He declares that he cannot simply ignore that grave offense with a few simple friendly words of apology. With an insane smile on his face, Seong Mo-hyun officially challenges the protagonist to a duel right there. Moran is left trembling with dread upon realizing that the terrible duel of the past timeline will repeat itself no matter what. Jin So-eun begins to let out a dark laugh, realizing that it is impossible to escape the fate traced by time. He laughs loudly in the middle of the hall, accepting the fact that that inevitable confrontation really had to happen. He opens a confident smile and says mentally that everything ended up happening exactly as he had already foreseen. Moran watches him with a sad and worried look, lamenting not having managed to prevent that imminent tragedy. The rival heir celebrates hysterically, anxious to crush and humiliate his opponent for good in that duel. The protagonist maintains the smile on his face, knowing very well that this is the perfect chance to rewrite history. The hallmaster fights furiously with the boy for having accepted that extremely dangerous and insane duel. She interrupts the discussion and surprisingly agrees, saying that the protagonist's reasoning is correct. The young man celebrates the support, but the girl soon adds that this does not change the fact that he should have backed down. She questions if he really thinks that their sect's basic techniques could hurt such a strong heir. Sarion starts crying from desperation and worry, fearing to see her sect companion die in that combat. The protagonist tries to calm her in a fun way, guaranteeing with firmness that he already has an infallible victory plan. The hallmaster fights with the boy, saying that his unfunny jokes are just making the girl cry even more. The hallmaster asks the boy's father to intervene, but the experienced warrior remains in absolute silence. Jin So-eun asks his father to trust him and just watch the development of that combat without needing to interfere. The boy's father grinds his teeth with force, demonstrating an immense internal tension in the face of that difficult choice. Finally, the master accepts his son's decision and walks away, leaving the hallmaster quite irritated with the attitude. The experienced warrior trusts his son's determination and decides to give him the vote of confidence he needs so much. The day of the confrontation dawns under a clear sky at the rival sect's headquarters, announcing the beginning of the great duel. Sarion runs desperately through the hallway, calling the protagonist with an expression of immense panic. She stutters, trying to explain that the external hallmaster and the boy's father decided to do something unbelievable. Jin So-eun widens his eyes in dread upon realizing the terrible mistake his beloved father just committed for him. He runs with all possible speed toward the main training courtyard of the rival sect. The young man laments deeply, for the tragic situation he feared most ended up coming to fruition that day. In the courtyard, the large crowd whispers about the boy's father having bowed publicly to try to save his son. The protagonist arrives at the location and is devastated to see his father kneeling in a humiliating way before the rival leaders. The leaders of the adversary sect display extremely arrogant smiles while watching that humiliating scene. The old leader apologizes for the confusion to the alliance strategist, who only watches everything silently. The great strategist, Juge So-myung, analyzes the situation, realizing the malicious intention behind that public humiliation. He notes that the rival sect is totally determined to expel the Taeil sect from its prestigious position. Jin Taesan hits his forehead against the stone floor, begging desperately for them to spare the life of his only son. The old adversary leader demands to hear in detail what terrible crime was committed by the master's son. He accuses the boy of having uttered extremely offensive words that stained the name of his glorious sect. The old man mocks, comparing the attitude of father and son, but is suddenly interrupted by a furious shout from the protagonist. Jin So-eun walks resolutely toward his father, begging with a trembling voice for him to get up off the ground. The boy questions the reason for him humiliating himself in that way, while his father orders him to be quiet. The young man retorts that no real son would stand seeing his own father go through such a deplorable humiliation. Jin So-eun asks with a determined and cold look for his father to take a step back and trust his skills. He clenches his fists with immense fury, feeling the spiritual energy boil in his veins in an overwhelming way. The rival heir mocks that beautiful display of affection, commenting that the scene is almost tear-worthy. He warns, laughing, that he can let the offense slide if the protagonist also kneels on the ground next to his father. In response to the humiliating provocation, the young man simply draws his sharp sword extremely quickly. Jin So-won warns his father that from the moment he drew his sword, the matter no longer belongs to him. He declares with firmness that no excuse or public humiliation will work from now on in that courtyard. The boy states with all his conviction that he intends to prove once and for all the value of his beloved sect. His companions watch him worriedly as he swears to prove that he is not someone who just talks and does nothing. His father sighs, resigned, calling his own son a foolish boy, but understanding his proud decision to fight. Jin So-won asks his father to watch that combat closely, promising that he will not disappoint him in the arena. The sky shines intensely over the training arena, marking the beginning of that long-awaited duel of generations. The adversary grips the hilt of his immense heavy sword firmly, preparing to start the attacks. He challenges the protagonist with a sneer, demanding that the heir show the entire real strength of his decadent sect. The young man knows that his rival grew up receiving all possible resources, but maintains his total focus on the combat. He analyzes that the rival's sword is too heavy, being a huge disadvantage against the speed of his sect. The protagonist executes the first form of his technique, aiming to nullify the opponent's strength through pure speed. The rival heir widens his eyes in such shock upon realizing the absurd speed of the boy's onslaught. The two blades clash violently, generating a strong wave of impact that reverberates throughout the training courtyard. The opponent grinds his teeth with hatred, complaining that the protagonist keeps dodging his blows like a rat. They exchange a fast sequence of sword attacks with sparks shining intensely at each new collision. Seong Mo-hyun delivers an overwhelming vertical blow that cuts the wind with a terrifying destructive power. The strong impact of the heavy sword hits the stone ground, opening a huge crater and spreading dust through the air. The strategist analyzes the combat, thinking silently about the terrible abyss of power that exists between the two. The rival heir smiles sadistically, asking with a sneer if that speed was all he had to show. The protagonist takes a deep breath and sweats cold, feeling the immense physical pressure generated by that colossal sword. The opponent advances victoriously, mocking that the attacks of that decadent sect are nothing more than a big joke. Jin So-won drives his sword into the ground firmly, telling the opponent to shut his mouth and stop celebrating before the time. He advances ferociously, declaring that the entire beginning of the confrontation served only as a simple warm-up. Their blades cross very closely, with the two warriors exchanging looks of pure fury and determination in the courtyard. The protagonist recognizes internally that the physical strength of his opponent is incredibly monstrous and out of the ordinary. With a macabre look, the rival whispers, asking if in the past there wasn't another brave fool exactly like him. The rival heir says that in the past, a fool insulted their sect and lost badly in a duel against his father. At that time, Jin Taesan refused firmly to admit a mistake he did not commit before the arrogant oppressor. The rival reveals sadistically that the price paid for that audacity was a terrible and painful hot iron punishment. The chest and back of the master were completely marked with terrible hot iron burn scars. The rival heir opens a macabre smile, preparing to reveal the name of the man punished in such a brutal way. He reveals with immense sneer that the man punished in the past was none other than the protagonist's own father. The protagonist is left completely in shock upon finally discovering the terrible truth about his father's past. He turns slowly toward his father, unable to believe the magnitude of the cruelty he had to endure in silence. The experienced master stares at his son, maintaining his firm and silent posture despite all the revealed pain. The adversary takes advantage of the distraction to deliver a brutal kick, yelling that he should never take his eyes off the combat. The protagonist is thrown violently backward, colliding with force against the stone ground of the great arena. Saryeon and the hall master scream in desperation to see the boy suffer that terrible impact in the training arena. Mo-hyun observes with disdain the opponent trying to stand up staggeringly, believing that the fight is already decided. He mocks, saying that the boy is as foolish as his father for insisting on a fight he clearly cannot win. The disciples of the rival sect laugh loudly, mocking the alleged weakness and decadence of the Taeyul sect in the arena. The old masters watch the fight with convinced smiles, certain that the humiliating history of the past will repeat itself. The protagonist wipes the blood from his face and asks mentally if that humiliation is really what everyone there expects. With a deeply somber and sharp look, he raises his head, demonstrating that the real combat starts now. He executes again the first form of his speed technique, advancing against the opponent like a blue lightning bolt. With superhuman agility, the protagonist slides under the heavy sword blow of the opponent cleanly. The rival widens his eyes in dread upon realizing the boy appearing right in front of him with a mortal and determined look. He delivers a stunning sequence of fast and precise cuts that leave the rival heir totally cornered. Mo-hyun tries to block the attacks desperately, yelling with anger for not being able to keep up with such speed. In the boy's mind, the manuals float, revealing the ancient knowledge that guides perfectly each of his movements. The rival heir starts sweating from pure desperation, demanding to know what cowardly trick the boy used in the fight. Jin So-eun just ignores the complaints and continues to deliver blows increasingly fast and powerful against the enemy. The precise movements of his sword create a true web of shining cuts that surround the opponent completely. He executes the improved version of his speed technique, delivering a spectacular aerial onslaught in the courtyard. The heir of the rival sect is hit repeatedly, suffering several deep cuts across his chest and shoulders. The protagonist takes a deep breath, controlling his internal energy to keep the flow of his spiritual channels stable. Seong Mo-hyun spits a large amount of blood and uses his heavy sword as support to not collapse to the ground. The young master opens an ironic smile and asks with a sneer if that weakness was all the rival sect had. The opponent grinds his teeth with pure hatred, unable to accept that he is being totally humiliated by a decadent rival. Furious, he raises his gigantic sword with both hands, accusing the protagonist of using cheap tricks. He executes his most destructive technique, delivering a vertical blow with the goal of slicing the boy in half. The terrible impact makes the stone ground explode again, raising a dense curtain of dust and smoke in the arena. The guests cover their faces, startled by the violence of the blow and unable to see anything amidst the smoke. Without wasting time, Seong Mo-hyun advances furiously through the mist of dust to try to end the combat for good. He shouts, infuriated, calling the protagonist an insignificant insect while delivering another brutal attack from up close. But the protagonist foresees the attack perfectly and dodges the heavy blow with an extremely subtle movement. The rival heir is surprised by a fast counterattack that hits his cheek squarely, making him groan in pain. Jin So-eun maintains his face completely calm and focused, delivering a new sequence of fast sword blows. The two swords collide repeatedly, with the boy blocking each heavy attack with mastery and precision. The old rival leader goes pale with panic upon realizing that the boy's sword techniques exceed all his expectations. The experienced strategist Juge So-myung notes that the difference in real combat experience between the two is absurd. The audience is left in complete shock upon noting that the strongest heir is being pushed backward in the combat. The boy sketches a cold smile, remembering all the accumulated resentment and suffering that came from his past life. He knows very well that just winning that simple duel will not be enough to erase all the humiliation of the past. The opponent advances, delivering a desperate vertical blow, yelling that the boy's alleged luck will end right there. Seong Mo-hyun runs with all his might, gathering every drop of internal energy for his last massive attack. The opponent delivers an overwhelming sword blow that the protagonist manages to dodge by jumping skillfully. Jin So-eun takes advantage of the gap to touch the rival's chest, activating subtly the power of sucking his energy. The rival heir widens his eyes in dread upon feeling something extremely strange happen to his body. He shouts furiously, asking what kind of trick that is while trying to counterattack the fast protagonist. Jin So-eun warns mentally that from that day on, everything will change and the rival sect will finally be surpassed. With a precise blow, the boy makes Mo-hyun's immense sword fly far away, disarming him completely in the arena. The disciples in the audience watch that scene with jaws dropped, unable to believe what just happened. The once feared rival warrior is left paralyzed with panic upon realizing that he just lost his main weapon. The protagonist just stares at him with total coldness, maintaining his calm combat posture under the attentive gazes. The colossal sword hits the stone ground with a metallic bang, embedding itself deeply before everyone. The two warriors remain standing in the arena, with the rival heir still in shock due to the loss of his sword. He grinds his teeth with pure humiliation, unable to accept the shameful defeat he just suffered in the courtyard. The boy whispers to himself, unable to believe that he, the blood wolf, actually let his sword drop in combat. He punches the ground, taken by a deep hatred, distraught over having been defeated by someone from that lesser sect. Blinded by pure rage, he advances desperately with empty hands, delivering a furious shout against his rival. Jin So-eun dodges with extreme ease that entire desperate onslaught, letting the rival pass into the void. Without any kind of balance, the rival heir collapses face down onto the stone floor in an extremely pathetic way. He props himself up on the ground, spitting blood and staring at the ground, not understanding where such sudden weakness came from. The old leader of the rival sect watches the scene with a deeply serious and tense look from high up on his throne. Mo-Yin trembles entirely while trying to stand up staggeringly right before the feet of the calm protagonist. He bellows that no one should mock him while attempting uselessly to deliver one more blow against the boy. Jin So-un just dodges his head with total ease, maintaining his expression of complete boredom in the face of the attack. The rival heir falls to his knees on the ground, completely exhausted and without strength to continue holding the fight. He widens his eyes, taken by sudden terror upon realizing what is really happening to his body. The boy notes, startled, that his internal energy is failing, preventing him from executing any basic technique. Feeling his body weak and trembling, he realizes in a panic that he can barely keep his hands steady in that courtyard. Jin So-un points his blade and states with a sneer that the opponent's internal energy cultivation is too weak. The rival heir groans in pain on the ground, finding it a complete absurdity to be defeated in such a humiliating way by him. He grinds his teeth, remembering that he consumed the most expensive spiritual elixirs his rich sect could buy. However, he cannot accept that he is being totally surpassed in a duel of pure spiritual energy. The protagonist raises his sword coldly, preparing to deliver the coup de grace on the opponent. Suddenly, the rival remembers the moment the protagonist touched him at the start of the combat, and everything makes sense. But before he can conclude his reasoning, the boy delivers a fast kick against the adversary's chest. The injured heir bellows with all his strength, accusing the protagonist of using forbidden witchcraft. He shouts, desperate, asking if the youth has any notion of who he is performing that madness in front of. The rival accuses the boy of using forbidden arts of the Alliance and demands that the guards capture him as a cult spy. The old leader of the rival sect watches that entire lamentable scene in silence from the top of his tribunes of honor. With a thundering and imposing tone of voice, the experienced master shouts, ordering everyone to remain in absolute silence. The defeated grandson begs his grandfather, claiming that he felt with total clarity his internal energy being drained. The protagonist only remains in silence, maintaining his completely calm and neutral expression in the face of the accusation. The rival shouts hysterically, accusing the boy of having learned the legendary and forbidden energy-sucking technique. The disciples in the audience start whispering, startled, upon hearing the name of the terrible forbidden drainage technique. The old master descends the stone stairs calmly toward the courtyard to resolve the situation personally. The strategist, Zhuge So-myung, warns seriously that accusations of forbidden arts should not be made lightly. He reminds that the Alliance punishes the guilty severely, but that false accusations receive an even worse punishment. The strategist finds that entire situation shameful and plans the right moment to intervene to calm the spirits. The protagonist observes in silence the old leader approaching the defeated grandson who continues whimpering on the ground. The young master explains calmly that he endured the insults and even apologized before being forced into that duel. He reveals that the rival's only intention was to humiliate his sect publicly, to take their spot in the peaks of prestige. Jin So-un states with determination that he accepted the challenge only to prove the real strength of his sect in the arena. Moran watches the scene with deep disgust to see her brother whimpering about witchcraft just because he is losing the fight. The protagonist declares in a firm tone that the rival sect clearly does not have the right to join the 108 peaks. The strategist, Zhuge So-myung, sketches a discreet smile, finding it interesting to continue observing the unfolding of that scene. The audience starts to revolt, accusing the rivals of using grave lies just out of pure envy and political greed. The rival heir realizes in a panic that he ended up destroying completely the reputation of his own proud family. Desperate, he hits his hand on the ground and tries to appeal to his grandfather, shouting his famous title of Bloodwolf. He insists that he never lost to anyone his age and that his defeat would only make sense if there was witchcraft involved. He swears on his knees before his grandfather that he felt with total certainty his internal energy being drained several times in the arena. The heir shouts, hallucinated, promising to accept any type of severe punishment if he is lying about that accusation. The old leader lets out a long and heavy sigh, realizing the gravity of the situation his family found themselves in. Faced with the scandal, he decides to take a step forward and decrees in a loud tone the immediate interruption of that duel. The protagonist questions the interruption, but the old man states that he needs to search his body due to the suspicion of witchcraft. The boy retorts to the demand, but the old man stares at him, furious, asking if he is insinuating that his grandson is a liar. Jin So-un asks how they will assume responsibility in case he is innocent, but the old man orders immediate silence. The old adversary leader points his finger, shouting furiously that the more the boy argues, the more suspicious he seems. He insists that he will do the inspection of the young man's body at that instant, and that he will hold the entire Taeil sect responsible for what occurred. At that moment of extreme tension, the protagonist lets out a strong shout, calling for his father's presence in the courtyard. The experienced warrior, Jin Tai-san, positions himself firmly and imposingly before the threats of the adversary leader. The protagonist grips the hilt of his sword firmly, declaring that he is willing to offer his own life for the honor of the sect. The boy's father observes him with an expression of immense tension and worry in the face of that fearless attitude of his son. The young master demands that no one touch his body until the arrival of the Alliance's official authorities, in case he dies there. The boy kicks Mo Hyun's immense sword far away, demonstrating his total disdain for the threats of his adversaries. With his hand wrapped in a powerful bluish aura, he swears to protect the legacy and dignity of his family until the end. With a mortal look, the protagonist officially challenges the very supreme leader of the adversary sect to a duel. The young Gaye Cheol-yong and the other disciples of the audience panic totally at the absurd audacity of that challenge. The old adversary leader grinds his teeth with pure fury, insulting the bold boy for his unbelievable audacity. He roars, furious, questioning how a mere disciple dares to raise his voice and challenge his maximum authority in that courtyard. The immense spiritual pressure generated by the old man's roar makes the guests cover their faces to protect themselves from the gale. Faced with the imminent danger, the protagonist's father and the hall master draw their swords, ready for combat. Jin So-eun is extremely surprised to see the two important figures of his sect position themselves in his defense. His father shouts, demanding he back down, stating that no real father would send his own son to die first. The old rival leader advances, jumping ferociously, and swears that he will cut the lineage of the Teal sect once and for all. The guests of the celebration watch in horror the beginning of that confrontation, which promises to turn into a massacre. Suddenly, the imposing voice of the strategist, Juge So-myung, echoes through the courtyard, ordering the end of that madness. The influential strategist appears triumphantly right in the middle of the combatants, blocking the onslaught from both sides. With an extremely serious look, he orders harshly that everyone sheath their swords immediately in the courtyard. The guards and guests watch the scene in absolute silence, respecting the supreme authority of the Alliance's strategist. He turns directly to Jin So-eun and orders that the youth also sheath his blade without causing more problems there. To everyone's surprise, the protagonist refuses the command, stating with firmness that he will not sheath his weapon at that moment. The old adversary leader roars furiously at the boy's boldness to disrespect the highest political authority present there. Ignoring the old man's scandal, the strategist just focuses his eyes on the boy and asks to hear his true justification. The youth accuses the rival sect of using the duel only as an excuse to humiliate them and try to corner him with falsehoods. He questions where the justice of the alliance was at that moment and how he could trust a strategist who permitted that. The man descends the stairs, commenting that the boy's words are extremely bold but recognizing his enormous courage. He admits that he was just observing everything closely to find the exact and ideal moment to intervene fairly. Juge So-myung brings his face close to the boy and asks directly what he really wishes to obtain with that attitude. The protagonist stares at the old leader of the rival sect and with a cold look, prepares to declare his final demand. Jin So-eun shoots with total coldness that his true goal there is to obtain the head of the leader of that adversary sect. The absurd and courageous declaration of the boy leaves everyone in the courtyard in absolute silence and completely paralyzed with shock. The strategist realizes that even if the boy loses the death match, his sect will be seen as martyrs and the rivals as villains. The strategist realizes that the situation can be used politically to destroy the Iron Sword sect. He asks if the sect leader is confident enough to bet the very name of his sect on it. The old leader responds that eliminating forbidden arts is a common obligation of all and does not require bets. He says that he will assume the responsibility using his own sword if the strategist insists so much. The strategist smiles and agrees, saying that if he wants to use the sword, then a new condition will be imposed. The strategist then proposes that the leader also bet the sacred weapon of his sect at that moment. The protagonist is surprised to hear about the legendary sacred weapon of the leader of the Iron Sword sect. It is the Ninefold Sword, which belonged to the founder and was passed down from generation to generation. The leader despairs, saying he accepted participating in a duel but never agreed to bet his treasure. The strategist questions the necessity of a duel if it suffices just to examine the boy's dantian calmly. The disciples in the audience start murmuring that the conduct of the sect leader is appearing very suspicious. The strategist casts a somber look, suggesting that the leader would be committing a despicable act. The sect leader remains in silence while his face is taken by a terrible shadow of tension. Pressured, he finally ends up yielding and accepts doing exactly what the strategist ordered. The strategist is satisfied and asks if the protagonist also agrees with that proposed agreement. The youth approaches in a calm and decided way so that the examination of his internal energy can be performed. The strategist asks him to relax and not resist while he sends his energy to examine his body. A strong, shining blue energy starts to flow from the strategist's hands directly into the youth's arm. The spiritual energy expands in a flash of light under the attentive gazes of all those present at the location. The defeated rival shouts hysterically, accusing the protagonist of having mastered that forbidden art. The forbidden technique absorbs the energy of others, generating a chaotic mixture of different forces in the Dantian. The strategist analyzes that if the boy really used the technique, his Dantian would be in a messy state. Amidst the great tension, the youth just keeps his hand firm, gripping the hilt of his sword tightly. The strategist widens his eyes in surprise upon finishing analyzing the protagonist's internal channels. The protagonist's sect companions sweat cold, waiting anxiously for the final verdict of the examination. The strategist pulls his hand away and declares in a loud tone that the boy did not learn such a sky-devouring technique. The old rival leader is left completely paralyzed upon hearing that the boy possesses no witchcraft. The defeated grandson shouts, hallucinated, begging for them to believe him, for he is sure he was robbed. The old leader refuses to accept the result, believing there can only be some type of hidden trick. Out of his mind, he advances brusquely and grabs the protagonist's arm to verify the channels with his own hands. A violent discharge of blue energy erupts from the forced contact, generating great panic in the court. The protagonist roars in pain while the other masters shout, demanding that the old man let go of the boy immediately. The youth suffers a terrible internal shock, which causes him to spit a large amount of blood. The girl screams in desperation at her grandfather, alerting that absurd attack might end up killing the youth. The old man finally realizes the gravity of his impulsive act, while the youth's body collapses without strength. The companions run to help the unconscious boy, while the strategist condemns the old man's action. The strategist stares at the leader with a look of pure fury, demanding explanations for that cowardly aggression. Internally, the aggressor despairs upon confirming that there really was no trace of witchcraft in him. Fallen to the ground, the protagonist props himself on his bloody hand and tries to speak with an extremely weak voice. The blood continues to drip onto the stone floor, while the youth cries out for justice before the entire public. Even gravely wounded, the boy raises his head, demanding with firmness that the leader kneel and apologize. The defeated grandson watches that scene completely horrified upon seeing the disastrous turn everything took. Moran and the other disciples cover their mouths in pure astonishment before the outrage committed by their own leader. The boy extends his hand covered in blood toward the old leader, demanding that he pay for his mistake. With a frighteningly focused look, the youth repeats the order, demanding that he pay the due price right there. After giving his last warning, the boy's body finally gives way, and he starts to collapse completely without strength. The youth falls unconscious while his father and the other warriors shout in desperation around his body. The hallmaster calls for the boy's father, while the atmosphere in the courtyard becomes extremely heavy and tense. The strategist then stares at the aggressor and demands coldly that he honor the promise he made before everyone. The sun shines over the main pavilion of the sect, while the repercussions of that incident start to arise. Suddenly, the protagonist begins to regain consciousness slowly and lets out a groan of pain. He opens his eyes with difficulty, remembering immediately everything about the Iron Sword sect. The youth stands up from the bed in a start, shouting with fury for the leader of the adversary sect. Someone knocks lightly on a book on the table and comments calmly that the youth has finally woken up. Meanwhile, in a dark and damp cell, some rats run, startled, across the cold stone floor. The defeated grandson continues imprisoned and shouts that he has total certainty that the rival used the forbidden art. He grips the iron bars, begging desperately for his grandfather to believe his words. The old leader starts walking away coldly, saying that his grandson still has not recovered his good sense. The old man laments having thought about passing the command of the sect to a fool who made them lose so much prestige. He orders harshly that the boy not receive a single drop of water until he reflects on his mistakes. The prisoner shouts, desperate for his grandfather, while the door of the cell closes, leaving him in darkness. Back in the beautiful chamber, the wise strategist asks if that little performance finally finished. The protagonist is left without reaction upon realizing that the strategist is sitting right there in the same room. He tries to disguise it by whistling and feigning total innocence while questioning the meaning of that word. The youth realizes that the strategist is too perceptive and would never be fooled by superficial excuses. Zhuge Somyang asks not to waste time in a useless way, demonstrating all his legendary wisdom. The protagonist remembers that before returning, that man was considered the greatest tactical mind of the Alliance. The boy asks if he already knew everything from the beginning, and the strategist confirms he was aware. He reveals that the protagonist intentionally provoked the sect leader to force him to act in the court. He explains that the youth used him as a shield to avoid having to duel directly against the strong leader. He adds that the boy bit his own cheek to feign dramatic bleeding during the examination. He places the writing brush on the wooden table and demands that the boy speak the whole truth. The wise strategist asks directly when the protagonist started devising that brilliant plan. Silence takes over the room while the two stare at each other in an extremely serious way through the window. The protagonist sweats cold while observing the experienced elder take a sip of tea in a calm manner. The strategist asks ironically if the youth ended up forgetting how to speak in the face of his question. The boy puts his feet on the wooden floor and starts to formulate his response in a very cautious way. He points to the large sword and questions if that is the legendary weapon he will receive as a reward. He changes his attitude completely and with shining eyes asks to examine the valuable prize up close. The wise elder is left totally confused and speechless with that sudden and bold change of posture. The wise man complains that he was the one asking questions while the youth mocks, thinking about selling the treasure, finding the boy very bold. The strategist hears him explain that he did not have any big old plan. He reveals that he just acted to crush the rivals in case they caused problems during the banquet. The strategist observes him with a penetrating look, trying to decipher the mystery behind that boy. He flips through his book, asking how the boy foresaw that the opponent would speak about forbidden techniques. The protagonist warns in a relaxed way that responding beyond that would cost the wise man very dearly. He explains that he already responded to one question as retribution for the help in the conquest of the sacred sword. The elder boasts, saying that many would pay fortunes to talk to him, but the boy seems not to care. He agrees happily and performs a formal greeting, preparing to go away from there for good. The strategist remains in absolute silence, just staring at the unbelievable audacity of that boy. The wise man hits a small treasure box on the table, offering it as payment for one more useful answer. An extremely victorious and astute smile appears on the corner of the young protagonist's mouth. He explains that proud prodigies usually have predictable attitudes that are easy to be manipulated. The boy tells that he just took advantage of his arrogance and his inability to accept defeat. Mentally, the youth laughs, remembering that he purified the stolen energy so that the examination would not detect anything. Not even the smartest strategist of the Alliance could notice the hidden flow in his dantian. The protagonist extends his hands, opening finally the small box to verify his newly obtained prize. He is left in shock upon seeing 3 rare Ironheart spiritual pills delivered by the rival. The youth laughs loudly, thanking hysterically for receiving such a valuable and powerful treasure. The strategist passes by the youth, asking why he did not defeat him in a clean way if he was so strong. The youth explains that a simple victory would be seen as luck, and his goal was to prevent future oppressions. The strategist asks what would happen if he were not there, and the boy were considered guilty. The protagonist responds that, even with his death, the examination of his corpse would clear the honored name of his sect. The strategist stops walking, surprised to note that the boy really was disposed to risk his life. He questions with incredulity if the youth would risk everything for something that the majority would consider futile. The protagonist clenches his fist with extreme force, demonstrating an immense seriousness and internal focus. His look becomes deeply sharp, revealing that his family's honor is nothing insignificant. The two continue staring at each other in silence in the room, maintaining an atmosphere of intense and profound tension. The youth reads the strategist's name in the book and questions if his prestigious family considers honor trivial. He inquires in an imposing way if a lesser sect does not have the same right to protect its own dignity. The elder stares at him intently, processing the young man's words, which were so firm and full of pride. Suddenly, the strategist begins to laugh loudly, finding the protagonist's attitude fascinating. The young man is a bit confused by the eccentric reaction, but he acknowledges the elder's genius. The wise man tosses a small artifact to the boy, stating that he deserves to receive one more special gift. The protagonist catches the object in midair, and his eyes widen as he realizes what it actually is. He is completely perplexed and shocked to recognize the extreme rarity of the item in his hands. It is a token that grants direct entry into the prestigious martial arts academy without the need for tests. He grips the object tightly, realizing the golden opportunity that has just fallen into his lap. The elder asks him to work at his special office after graduating from the famous elite academy. The boy is completely dumbfounded and surprised by such a sudden job offer. He remembers with horror that the office is famous for overworking its staff and forbidding merit. The strategist guarantees he will create a position for him, but the young man panics in silence at the idea. The elder escapes in a bizarre way through the window, and the boy questions why he didn't use the bedroom door. Outside, the strategist laughs loudly, telling the boy to hurry up and join him soon. The protagonist screams in desperation, begging the old man to wait, but it is already too late to catch him. The elder walks away laughing loudly, thinking his office will finally be much more interesting. The next day, the gates of the Iron Sword sect appear under the clear sky, marking a new beginning. Beneath the beautiful purple flowers of a tree, young Moran watches the rival group's departure from afar. She maintains a sad expression, recalling the harsh words of warning she heard from the young man in the courtyard. She remembers the cruel threats made by her own grandfather against the integrity of the entire rival sect. The image of the young man covered in blood, demanding they pay the right price, remains etched in her mind. She remembers shouting at her relatives, trying to contain their shameful behavior that day. Overcome by shame and guilt, she lowers her head, not knowing how to face the protagonist there again. Suddenly, the young master appears, whispering in her ear and making her let out a startled scream. Blushing deeply with shame, she stutters, asking what he is doing there with that bag. She begins to fidget with her fingers nervously, unable to form a coherent sentence for him. With eyes full of tears, she unburdens herself, saying that he acted in an extremely reckless manner. The protagonist asks calmly what exactly she means by that statement. She focuses her gaze on him and begins to recall the tensest moments of that violent and dangerous duel. Under a shower of purple petals, the young woman asks why he had to go so far in that combat. She repeats the strategist's question about him risking his own life for something considered trivial. The protagonist asks if, in her view, his sect should have just accepted all that humiliation in silence. With a piercing gaze, he asks directly if that was the cowardly advice she wanted to give. She gestures desperately, denying the accusations and trying to explain herself clearly to him. Faced with the young man's coldness, she lowers her face, feeling the enormous burden of belonging to that tyrannical family. With a heavy heart filled with guilt, she hesitates for a few moments, not knowing what to say to redeem herself. Beneath the floating petals, the girl finally utters a sincere and deep apology. The young man surprisingly accepts the request and gently asks her to lift her head again. She looks up, completely surprised by the young warrior's sudden generosity and calmness. He says he will accept her apology because expecting repentance from the old leader would be asking too much. The girl promises she will try to convince her grandfather to change, but the young man says there is no need for that. He opens a beautiful, sincere smile, saying they no longer need to carry that chain of resentment. The young woman feels a tight squeeze in her chest, and her eyes fill with tears at the boy's nobility. He advises that if she truly regrets it, she must take the responsibility of changing the sect from within. The young man throws his large bag onto the grassy ground and ponders the differences between the two factions. He smiles warmly, remembering that in the end, everyone belongs to the one great Murim alliance. Moran lets out a light sigh, completely dazzled by the greatness of character he demonstrated. The two share that serene moment under the beautiful purple flowers of the immense wisteria tree. She acknowledges that the proud attitude of her brother and grandfather ended up bringing shame to the sect. The girl realizes that their refusal to apologize ended up forcing things to take a tragic turn. Quite comically, she begins to sniffle and wipe away her small tears of emotion. The protagonist panics comically, saying that crying does not suit a noble warrior at all. She extends a small black box, asking him to accept it as a reflection of her true feelings. He wonders, surprised, if it is his birthday, while she wishes for a better relationship between the sects. He opens the box's lid with curiosity, and his jaw almost drops from the shock of what he sees inside. It is the extremely rare steel protection pill, which surpasses any common elixir in that region in power. She opens a beautiful, sincere smile, hoping that at their next meeting they can finally smile together. The protagonist returns it with a big, friendly smile under the gentle shower of colorful petals in the garden. A few days pass, and the scene shifts directly to the entrance gates of the beloved Tail sect. The young man's eyes widen as he hears his name being shouted with immense enthusiasm by someone nearby. The little disciples run with open arms, showing contagious joy to see their hero back. The children jump on him with enthusiasm, demanding to see the legendary sword and know if the rumors are true. A young disciple with gray hair approaches shyly, calling out to the protagonist there in the court. It is little Yunho who scratches the back of his neck, appearing extremely embarrassed by the approach. Jin So-un jokes, asking if he wants a piggyback ride, but the boy admits that he used to regret being in the sect. He says sadly that people mocked his choice, considering the sect's technique too weak, but now everything has changed because he feels immense pride in being a disciple, thanks to the protagonist's victories. He tightens his grip on his sword, ensuring he will train with twice the dedication to improve him. The young man focuses his determined gaze and vows to become a warrior as incredible as his beloved senior. The sect leaders and hall masters watch the beautiful scene with proud smiles in the court. The protagonist extends his fist, touching the young companion's hand in a friendly way to seal the promise. He opens a wide, confident smile and warns jokingly that he will charge a high price for that beautiful oath. The great leader, Hong Moon-gi, admits happily that he couldn't even sleep from the excitement of the news of the victory. He gathers the group, congratulating them on their excellent performance in the mission, while his daughter greets him with respect. He laments silently about the more than 100 years of humiliation his weak sect had to endure in silence. The master recognizes that the young man accomplished an extraordinary feat that no other adult in the sect could. He confesses to feeling deep gratitude, but also a bit of shame for having relied so much on a boy. Wiping away a tear, the leader suggests in an excited manner, organizing a lavish banquet to celebrate the victory. The boy's father refuses the idea right away, warning furiously that the sect's meager budget would be wiped out. He retorts seriously, questioning whether the sect's honor would be able to fill anyone's stomach. Seeing the refusal, the leader decides to take a bag of coins from his own pocket to fund the festive banquet. Touched by the generosity, the other masters also decide to donate their coins to help with the preparations. Cleverly, the protagonist's father quickly collects all the money, thanking them with a huge smile of victory. The boy asks if they are really going to have a big party, but his father changes the subject, pretending not to hear. He states with a funny face that his hearing has been terrible lately, and he didn't hear anything about parties. He walks away laughing and planning to buy meat, while the young man accepts his father's cheapness with resignation. Despite everything, the protagonist feels relieved to see that his beloved father has finally returned to his normal state. The clear sky shines intensely over the sect, indicating that better times are to come for that family. Of the valuable Iron Heart pills, 2 were distributed, and the last one was kept as a training prize. Finally, attention turns to Cheol-yong's ambitious father, who begins to plot new power plans. He complains furiously that trading 3 ins for just 1 Iron Heart pill was a huge waste. He remembers the moment he tried to negotiate the pill by offering the ins to favor his own son. The leader retorts, remembering that while the sect was in danger, his son just drank and watched from afar. The leader questions if he intended to sell the hard-earned honor of the sect so cheaply. He shouts furiously that with the ins they could buy 5 pills a year, while the young man listens to it all in silence. The protagonist smiles, knowing that deep down the man is happy that the leader kept his word firmly. The young man announces that he is leaving to earn money, tired of hearing so many complaints about finances there. His father yells, asking how he will do that, but the boy asks him not to underestimate his skills so much. The man rants, wanting to know his exact destination, and the boy just prepares to open the doors. With an extremely confident smile on his face, he declares that he is going exactly where the money is. The scene shifts to the busy and prosperous Wanga village, full of shops and people walking around. A local resident with a straw hat expresses surprise at observing the grandeur of that region. Travelers comment on the Wanga mansion belonging to one of the richest merchant families in the world. They begin to gossip about the stunning beauty of the owner's daughter from that immense and rich property. But they find it very strange that absolutely no one has ever seen her personally outside the mansion. Inside, an imposing silhouette approaches a large and ornate wooden door rapidly. A firm and strong hand grabs the metal latch, pushing the door gently, which opens with a slight creak. Mr. Wang Geum-san enters the room excitedly, announcing happily to his daughter that Daddy has returned from his trip. However, the room is covered in ice, and the sound of a weak cough echoes worryingly through the room. Even the small decorative dolls are covered by a thick and bright layer of cold. Young Soso is sitting in the center of that freezing room and greets her father with an extremely weak voice. She tries to give a weak smile, but her flushed cheek reveals the terrible, feverish, and sick state of her body. The father kneels, worried, asking how her day was, and she replies that she spent it embroidering calm. She shows her beautiful handiwork proudly, saying that she wishes to sew a new outfit with that embroidery. The man watches her with immense affection, guaranteeing that the new outfit will certainly look wonderful on her. He is forced to fill her room with ice and cold items to manage to contain the terrible internal fever. The doctor shakes his head, explaining that the ice only serves to slow the symptoms, as there is no known cure. With a huge tightness in his chest, the doctor confesses that the young woman's health situation is extremely grave. He reveals the terrible prediction that she will likely not be able to live past 20 years of age. The father asks affectionately what she wants for her birthday, and the girl thinks for a brief moment. She confesses shyly that her true and biggest wish is to be able to see the village market up close. She explains sadly that with all the windows sealed, she ends up wondering what the real world is like out there. She thinks her request is too selfish, but the father smiles, revealing he was already preparing something special. The man reveals that he commissioned a special carriage designed exclusively to meet her needs. He explains that the vehicle will keep the air cold and that as soon as it is ready, she will be able to go for a ride whenever she wants. Overflowing with joy, the girl throws herself into her father's arms, giving him an extremely tight hug. With eyes shining with happiness, she thanks him, moved by the wonderful gift she will receive from him. The man is deeply moved and holds back tears, seeing the immense smile of happiness on her face. He thinks silently that he would gladly spend all his immense fortune if it meant saving her. The sunset colors the sky over the immense and luxurious commercial property as night begins to fall. The calm of the night soon covers the entire pavilion, plunging the gardens and hallways into absolute silence. However, the father enters the freezing room and is shocked to find a mysterious note on the floor. His hands tremble violently as he reads the terrible message, stating that they have kidnapped his only beloved daughter. Overcome by despair and hatred, he lets out a furious roar, demanding to know who dared commit such a crime. He orders his guards to chase the kidnappers, promising a colossal reward to whoever saves her. The businessman vows to pay a fortune fit for kings as long as they bring his precious daughter back safe and sound. A wanted poster is pasted in the village, catching the attention of the protagonist, who observes the announcement with arms crossed. With an extremely astute and focused gaze, he smiles out of the corner of his mouth, knowing his big chance has begun. He propels himself forward, taking off in a sprint under the dark sky with terrifying and swift agility. The boy runs with total focus, knowing very well the exact place where he must go to collect that reward. The elder claims furiously that the deal offered by their merchant group is nothing more than a cheap transaction. The protagonist warns that that commercial alliance will end as soon as they deliver what the merchant group wants. He jumps between branches, thinking that what his sect really needs is a sponsorship based on gratitude. He seeks a colossal sponsorship capable of paying off all of his sect's financial deficit once and for all. With an astute look, he plans to appear as the perfect savior to collect that huge reward. The young man finally lands with agility near an isolated cabin in the forest, locating his exact target. He recalls the old reports from his past life about the mysterious disappearance of a young woman. In his memory, there was only a terrible record of an unidentified girl murdered near there. The report said the body would be buried right next to that abandoned cabin in the middle of the forest. The boy sneaks onto the roof and opens a crack to spy on what is happening inside. He realizes he arrived on time, but is surprised by a strange movement by the kidnappers in the cabin. The bandits panic upon noticing that the body of the kidnapped young woman has started to burn like an ember. The protagonist is confused because in the memories of his previous life, there was no mention that she was ill. The criminals decide to eliminate the evidence and draw their swords, seeing that the kidnapping plan has gone wrong. The moment they raise their blade to kill her, the protagonist invades the place, destroying the wooden roof. He executes an extremely fast sword strike, neutralizing the first aggressor instantly there. The other masked bandits retreat in total panic, shouting to know who the meddling intruder is. The young man delivers precise and fast cuts, defeating all the remaining criminals in a few seconds. Soso moans in pain amidst the chaos, but opens her eyes confusedly upon hearing the shouts of the kidnappers' defeat. With blurred vision, she observes the heroic silhouette of the mysterious young man who saved her from that imminent danger. He cuts the ropes that bound her, but is frightened to feel her body temperature is absurdly high. The boy puts his hand on her forehead, worried, noticing that it is too serious to be just a fever. The girl lets out a weak groan of exhaustion, and the protagonist realizes with relief that she has just woken up. Frightened, she asks who he is, and the boy introduces himself calmly as a member of the Taiyul sect. He makes up that he was taking a night walk through the forest when he heard strange noises in that cabin. The young man claims proudly that he acted like a true hero by saving her from the criminals who were holding her hostage. She thanks him, promising that her father will reward him generously, but moans in pain again immediately after. The boy tries to help her up to take her to a doctor, but the young woman refuses the help desperately. She explains that without constant cold air, her body overheats, making her energy points burn. The protagonist is intrigued, trying to understand what kind of rare condition would make her energy points burn. He closes his eyes, concentrating deeply on his old memories to decipher that mystery. He begins to search through the various medical records he stored in his mind during his past life. His memories function like an immense library full of drawers containing ancient knowledge. A red arrow in his mind points directly to the section on rare and dangerous physical anomalies. He remembers having memorized countless texts in the Murim Alliance and searches for one that fits the symptom. His mind finally locates the exact book that perfectly describes her terrible physical condition. It is the classic written by Gong Yak-chun, which details extremely rare body temperature anomalies. The text describes a boiling fire energy that causes extremely high fevers and destroys energy channels. It is the legendary solar constitution, where the person is born with excessive and deadly heat in their body. He realizes with horror that this is not a common disease, but an innate condition from birth. The young man concludes with extreme concern that for that type of problem, there is simply no known cure.